Hey guys, it's Dad with Dad's Guide to Adulting. I hope you're doing well and having a great day. Today we're going to continue talking about the process of buying a car, and in particular we're going to be talking about budgeting and how you determine how much you can afford to pay. As I mentioned in the last video, the introduction to this section, I'm going to assume that you're going to finance your car purchase, by which I mean I'm going to assume you don't have enough cash right now to pay the full purchase price of the car, and that therefore you're going to take out a loan from a bank and pay the bank back over a period of years. That means that you're going to be paying interest charges. And so obviously the interest charges need to be taken into account when you're calculating your budget. So there are two key numbers when you're coming up with your budget for your car purchase that you need to keep in mind. The first one is the monthly payment. How much will you be paying back to the bank each month to pay off your car? So the second number is the overall amount of money you pay for the car, which is basically the number of monthly payments times the number of months that gives you the total. One of the more important things to keep in mind is that sometimes young people only focus on the monthly payment. They figure if I can pay $300 or $400 a month for the car, it's a good deal. What you forget to do though sometimes is look how long you're going to be paying that. The longer that you have to pay the bank back, the more you will be paying and the greater the purchase price for the car. So you need to keep in mind both of those numbers. One of the things that we'll talk about later in the negotiating video is you don't want to tell a salesman what your maximum monthly payment is, because they can always structure a deal that'll have you paying less than that per month. If you don't focus, however, on how long you're paying it, you may end up paying a lot more than you need to. So let's talk a little bit about the first part of a car purchase and coming up with your budget, the down payment. Well, what's a down payment? A down payment is usually you paying a portion of the purchase price of the car at the beginning. Most banks will not lend to you the full purchase price, 100% of the purchase price of the car. You usually need to put down about 10 or 20%. So for example, if you're buying a car for $10,000, you usually need to have $1,000 or $2,000 available to pay down the seller with that money, and then you would borrow the remaining 80%. Some lenders will not allow you also to borrow the money for the down payment. So if you're in a situation where you need to borrow money from your family for the down payment, that may cause a problem. So it's a really good idea to save for a number of months so you have the down payment ready to go by the time you walk into the dealership. Then you also need to think through when you're calculating your monthly payment, how much you can afford, what are your monthly expenses, and what range do you want those to be of your overall budget. We have a separate video on how to figure out your overall budget based on your income. Once you've done that, your car payments, you ideally don't want to have be more than 20% of your overall budget. And there are two parts to that. First off, the 10% is a maximum that you really should pay for the purchase price of the car. Then you would have another 5 to 10% of your budget for car maintenance and service and usage expenses. For example, car repairs, servicing when you change the oil and rotate the tires, damage, fuel, auto insurance. Altogether, the purchase price for the car, plus all the expenses that you have on a monthly basis, really should be less than 20% of your overall budget. The more you can get that number down as a percentage of your budget, the better off you are, because the less likely it will mean that you miss a payment, which then hurts your credit score, which we talk about in our financing videos. So the things that you need to include in your monthly expenses, what do you need to include and how do you figure those out? Well, the car expenses include auto insurance, which tends to be more expensive for younger people because they're less experienced drivers unless they present more of a risk to the insurance company. Maintenance, service, fuel, taxes, registration, parking, and tolls. Taxes usually can run anywhere from 5 to 10% of the purchase price of the car. There are a number of good websites out there where you can figure out what your fuel costs are likely to be given the type of car that you have and how many miles you have to drive it. For example, there's one called fueleconomy.gov. See our website for a couple of those, but they can help you figure out your fuel costs. And then on registration fees that you're going to have to pay the government, either the state or the county, to register the car and pay for your license plate, that can be determined on the state's DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles website, and it's good to have all that. Once you've calculated those numbers up, how do you figure out what the purchase price of the car is that you can afford? Well, helpfully, there are a number of online calculators on the internet that allow you to do that. We've listed a couple on the website. They vary. Some of them are better than others. Some of them require more information than others, but they tend to come up with good numbers and ranges for what you can afford. Do keep in mind when you're using these websites that if they start asking you for too much personal information, your name, your address, your email, you don't necessarily want to provide all that simply to be able to get a range of purchase prices for your car. So exercise some caution when you're entering personal information into those websites. Keep also in mind something very important. Those websites will not tell you what you should pay. They tell you the maximum that you can pay. That doesn't mean that when you go actually buy the car that you want to pay the maximum amount. Give yourself a cushion. That does tell you, though, how much you have got available to work with when you walk into the dealership. And you should never let them talk you into going over that amount. Make that decision ahead of time and stick with it once you get going. And one of the things I think that makes a lot of sense is, and this was suggested on USAA's website, it's a good insurance company, test out your budget before you buy the car. Set aside for 3 or 4 months the amount of money that you think you're going to need for your car, payment and maintenance and service expenses, and see if you can actually afford it. See if you can fund that safely and still live off the remaining portion for all your other expenses. If you can't and you're having trouble, much better to know that before you buy the car than after. If you're in good shape, rock on. So that's basically how you figure out a budget. In our next video, we're going to talk about financing car loans, meaning borrowing the money to pay for it. Until then, remember, you got this.